Sometimes the most chilling stories don't unfold in the shadows of big cities, but in the stillness of small towns, where everything seems normal until it isn't. In January 2024, in Yukon, Oklahoma, an entire family was found dead inside their quiet suburban home. A father, a mother, 2 children. Local authorities called it a murder-suicide. Case closed. No further questions. But the deeper you look, the more unsettling it becomes. A missing laptop, deleted voicemails, demolished evidence, and a powerful energy corporation that controlled more than just the town's electricity. What if this wasn't the act of a desperate man, but the silencing of one who knew too much? In this series, we don't just revisit the official timeline. We pull at the threads that were meant to stay hidden. We follow the voices they tried to erase. And we ask the questions no one else dared to. So before we begin, take a moment, get comfortable. And if you're drawn to uncovering stories that challenge the official version, stories that ask why, not just what, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. It helps us keep going and ensures you won't miss what comes next, because what you're about to see is just the beginning. This was this family murder covered up by a powerful corporation, a story of silence, power, and the truth that refused to die. It began on a cold January morning in 2024, in the quiet suburb of Yukon, Oklahoma, where snowfall covered everything in silence except for flashing red and blue lights parked outside the Candy residence, a modest 2-story home nestled in a cul-de-sac lined with holiday lights, still clinging to rooftops. Inside, police found a scene too horrific to match the stillness outside. Mark Candy, his wife Tricia, and their 2 children, both under 12, were dead from gunshot wounds, the weapon found near Mark's outstretched hand. The statement from Yukon PD came swiftly, almost too swiftly. A murder-suicide, no foul play, no suspects, case closed. But people who knew the Candace began to whisper that something wasn't right. Mark had no history of violence, no prior mental health struggles, and just a week before had been coaching his son's basketball team. Tricia, always active in the community, had left a voicemail for a local legal nonprofit 4 days before the deaths, her voice trembling as she said, "I think we're in danger. Please call me back." But no one ever did. The voicemail was deleted from the system days later, recovered only through a forensic audit. Mark Candy worked as a compliance officer for Reedridge Energy, a regional energy giant that employed nearly a third of Yukon's population and held immense influence over local law enforcement, media, and environmental regulation. In the weeks before his death, Mark had confided in a co-worker that he'd uncovered troubling documents related to groundwater contamination from a nearby drilling site. Data showing Reedridge had knowingly failed to report chemical leakage into the municipal water table. He had flagged it internally, sent a series of emails warning of legal exposure, and then, according to an insider, he went quiet. The emails stopped. He stopped coming to meetings. The last known communication from Mark was a scheduled report labeled urgent, liability and disclosure risk. That was never submitted. Reedridge later confirmed that Mark's company laptop had been remotely wiped for security purposes the morning of January 9th, just 2 hours before police arrived at his home. Police records showed that the home security cameras were disabled at 2:14 a.m., but no technical fault was recorded, and no footage from the previous night has ever surfaced. Tricia's sister says Tricia kept a journal, handwritten notes about the chemical reports, strange visits Mark had received at the house, and fears she hadn't been able to name. That notebook, like Mark's phone, was never recovered. 3 months after the deaths, the Candy home was abruptly demolished by order of the city, citing hazardous materials and structural risk. No permits were filed, no public notice was given, and no one seems able to answer why the house needed to be erased so completely. Reedridge Energy issued a single statement. "We are heartbroken by the loss of a valued employee and his family. Any speculation beyond the official findings is both harmful and unfounded." But as neighbors held candles in the snow that winter, and as Tricia's voicemail circulated quietly online, the town's grief turned to suspicion. Was Mark Candy a man unraveling under pressure, or a whistleblower's silence before he could speak? Was this a tragedy of the mind, or something far colder, far more calculated? A message scribbled on the sidewalk outside the empty lot says only this: He tried to tell the truth. In a town that depends on silence, his might have been too loud to live with, and yet no one seems willing to hear it. The deeper you look into the Candy case, the more the silence begins to speak. Weeks after the deaths, the official reports remained sealed, not redacted, not delayed, but sealed without explanation. No autopsy details, no toxicology findings, no ballistic report. The public was told there was nothing to see, but what they were shown was nothing at all. One former police staffer, speaking under condition of anonymity, said internal access to the case file was restricted just days after it was logged. It was like a wall came down, she told us. Even the chief stopped talking. For a small-town police department, it was a strange and sudden shift. And then came the missing documents. When Trisha's sister Melissa filed to retrieve a copy of the family's personal effects, journals, legal papers, family photos, she was told they had all been misplaced during demolition. But demolition hadn't even been scheduled when she made the request. The home was flattened 3 days later. By then, every trace of the family's life, and possibly the evidence of what they knew, was buried under concrete rubble. What survived were fragments. A data analyst and open-source investigator named Rowan Taylor, who had never even been to Oklahoma, took it upon herself to download archive versions of Redridge's internal environmental audits. Cross-referencing the dates with seismic activity logs, she found something chilling. On the day before the Candace died, Redridge had issued an emergency internal memo referencing containment breach protocols near the exact coordinates of the Candy residence. That memo was later deleted from their server, but Taylor had already captured the metadata. At the same time, a second source came forward, someone who claimed to have been on the security team at Redridge, responsible for physical and digital surveillance. His voice distorted, his identity hidden. He said Mark Candy was flagged as a Category C risk just days before his death. He was making too much noise, the man said. They don't always bury you. Sometimes they just let you fall apart. But this time it might have gone further. Redridge has denied all allegations. But the timeline, once clean and tragic, now glimmers with contradiction. One final, unexplained development came from the school district. A counselor who had met with Trisha just days before her death said that she appeared anxious and distracted, and that she had asked an odd question, whether there were any safe houses available for families under threat. The counselor didn't know how to respond. Trisha never came back. But most unnerving of all was the envelope. Delivered anonymously to an environmental journalist 6 weeks after the demolition, it contained a single item, a photocopy of a handwritten page. No fingerprints, no return address, just one sentence, scrawled in ink. They made him choose. Who made him choose? And what was the cost of his silence? The envelope was postmarked from Tulsa. The journalist who received it agreed to speak to us, but only off camera. She claims the handwriting matched another document from a completely unrelated whistleblower case, one involving corporate sabotage, blackmail, and falsified accident reports. She says the signature was missing, but the style was unmistakable. She says she's seen it before. But before she could say who it belonged to, she stopped answering our calls.